Welcome to Trekosophy, the podcast devoted to the philosophy of Star Trek. Joining us today is our captain, our fearless leader, the Socrates of Starfleet, the Descartes of Deep Space Nine. Say hello to Ben McLean.
That's me.
And also joining us is our chief engineer, the guy who taught Scotty everything he knows. Say hello to Chris McGee.
Howdy.
And also, for the first time tonight, the Domjot champion of the Delta Quadrant, it's John Hamer.
Hello.
And I'm Bill Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt. And tonight's episode is about the Prime Directive.
Yeah. Wow, that was pretty awesome.
Impressive.
I was watching a lot of catching up on some old episodes of Legendary, and they do the over-the-top intros like that. I wanted to give it a shot.
Okay.
Sounded great.
I liked it.
Okay, so somebody who actually supports the Prime Directive more than I do should probably take the lead in this thing.
You want somebody to
You
order
want to tear someone apart? Is that it?
Well, I don't know. Not someone, but I think there are some pretty serious problems with the Prime Directive. I guess there's really... Let's just start like this.
Well, let's define it first.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, and there's two ways to define it, as I understand. One is, as a plot device for writers within the Star Trek show, and the other is as a sort of ideal, a foreign policy ideal or doctrine of foreign policy. So so either it's a plot device or it is a doctrine, and which do we want to approach it as? And we kind of have to keep in mind which sense we're using it in.
Doctrine. I vote doctrine.
Yeah, we should probably look at it as a doctrine because it seems like captains tend to ignore the Prime Directive an awful lot for it to be a plot device. I think they'll just mention it so they have something to show that they're going to do what they got to do regardless of the rules.
Well, it's used to create conflict in some of the later series, at least, especially in Next Generation and Voyager. It's used to create conflict for the characters.
Yeah, and in the Enterprise series, you kind of see the birth of the Federation and how, not specifically, but how the Prime Directive came into being, based on Jonathan Archer's travels, most likely.
Okay, well, so if you're voting doctrine, then can somebody sort of define the Prime Directive as a foreign policy doctrine? Or do you want me to try that?
To Memory Alpha we go!
I've already got the particular page up and was looking at it.
There you go.
According to Memory Alpha, the Prime Directive, also known as Starfleet General Order 1, was one of Starfleet's most important binding principles about non-interference in another culture's internal affairs, natural development, and progression. The Prime Directive forbade Starfleet officers from interfering with the social order of any planet. Violation of the Prime Directive was generally considered a court-martial offense, followed by severe punishment unless sufficient justification can be made for the violation. Even though there have been incidents where Starfleet personnel have decided on strong ethical grounds to ignore the Prime Directive, on the whole, it was believed to do more good than harm.
Believed by who? Does it say by who?
It doesn't say by who, but I guess they
need to fix that.
Yeah, it says this article or section was written from the wrong POV, so there's probably a lot of subjectiveness to it. But I'm guessing by the creators by the Federation, not necessarily Starfleet, but the Federation thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So I think there's actually two kind of halves of that component as you just read it. So on the one hand, we have the the dividing line here is between pre and post warp cultures. So in other words, once a society has developed enough technology on their own so that they can actually launch, a warp capable spaceship, and then once you're after that. And so on the one hand, the Prime Directive before then is essentially total non-interference with that culture. But then afterwards, you obviously can interact with the culture, but then they occasionally cite the Prime Directive as a rule to not intervene within the culture's internal affairs.
Yeah, it does seem like they alter it just a little bit depending on what the episode needs. I hate to say it. But.
Yeah. Well, this of course raises the obvious question. First of all, why is interference bad? And second of all, why pre-warp cultures? And in the third place, isn't the Prime Directive directly contrary to the whole mission of exploration in the first place?
As I recall, I think it was Picard who said in the episode First Contact that a poor beginning with the Klingon Empire is what led to decades of war with them, and it was kind of decided at that point they needed to have better way of dealing with other cultures. Not certain of that though. Can anyone?
He said that it was a disastrous first contact with the Klingons. He didn't say what the results were in terms of decades of war, but that was what he cited in that episode, which is one of the pivotal Prime Directive episodes, probably.
Knowing the Klingons, I really doubt that first contact with them could have gone any other way.
Well, that may be true.
Well, let's see. I asked 3 questions, and what were they? Oh, yeah. First of all, why is... Okay, so you're saying that interference is bad because it may lead to war.
Yes.
That's reason number 1.
Although in that case, I think that one is only... that doesn't really... I don't think that makes sense. because I mean, that's only referring to a post-warp culture. You're not going to... like the Klingons, you're not going to have any problem, accidentally going to war with, whatever, the Edo or some kind of, primitive planet-based.
But
society.
Trek trivia time though. The Klingons, as I recall Star Trek history, were not a warp-capable civilization until they pirated the technology from somebody else that they ambushed.
The Herc.
That would have been the Romulans?
The Herc.
Oh, I don't remember the details. If you remember, where is that coming from? The Herc. What's that?
It's from Deep Space Nine when I think it's the episode The Sword of Kahless.
Oh yes,
when,
I remember
that. And so they go back and they find like kind of the deep Klingon history, but then that wouldn't refer to the the history of contact between the Federation or the Earth, whichever exists. Whenever you wanted to say the Klingons and the Earth or the Federation contacted each other, it would have been a pre-warp Klingons encountering a civilization that had no Prime Directive.
Yeah, but my point is that from the Star Trek writer's point of view, anytime a culture that is a pre-warp culture gets the technology of the warp drive without having developed it naturally themselves, they are it's a bad thing, and they are being there's a good chance they're going to be a warlike primitive race that probably supports the NRA. So
that's true even for cultures
and eats at Chick-fil-A.
Or they'll be like the Packlids, which is to say a dumb race that maybe eats a Chick-fil-A too. Who knows? Not warlike.
Looking at Earth's history, most of our biggest technological developments got weaponized fairly quickly. So I think part of the theory is for something like warp drive, you basically need antimatter to generate the energy to make a warp field. So if a culture is primitive and warlike and hostile and hasn't bred that out of themselves, you give them antimatter, they're going to have antimatter bombs instead of nuclear bombs, and it'll destroy the planet. So I think the thinking is if they can develop along far enough where they get the technology on their own and they don't blow themselves up, then they've got some potential for not being completely warlike.
Yeah, and considering there may be multiple cultures, multiple factions, I guess you could say, on a single planet, if the Federation does business with like only one of them, gives them, superior technology, then the other one's going to start, complaining, and all-out war breaks out eventually.
Hold on, that hardly ever happens on Star
Well,
Trek.
of course, because because they have the Prime Directive to prevent them from doing that.
Well, no, because they never have planets with multiple governments on them, or hardly ever.
Well, what was the
Almost always
episode?
a world state.
Well, usually, I have to agree there. But
Well, I mean, several of them
sometimes you
do
find
have civil wars going on, or their own version of the Arab Spring going on, where some facet of the society is trying to take a more proactive role in what their one world government does. So there is that potential for having two sides, even on a place with only one government.
What was the original series episode where they were actually kind of primitive people, but on a planet, and the Klingons were supplying at least one side. I think it was one side with new weapons.
Yeah, so that's one of the examples. I don't remember the title of it offhand right now, but that's one of them where the Klingons are supplying the villagers. And this is the one with the Mugatu, the big white monkey creature. And so the Klingons are supplying the villagers with guns, and so Kirk's solution is to take his friends who are his old friend who is the hill people, and to give them equal guns, and so that they can create an arms race that is supposedly, I don't know, essentially, I think the analogy at the time was this is how we got involved in Vietnam, and Kirk does exactly the same. Has exactly the same
private
idea.
Little War.
A Private Little War. There you go.
That's the name of the episode, A Private Little War.
Right.
I vaguely remember that one.
At the very end, I just remember that final line. He calls up Scotty and says, "Beam down 500 flintlocks."
Yeah.
Scotty says, "Beam down what?" Kirk says, "Snakes. Beam down some snakes for the Garden of Eden."
Yeah.
Huh.
So even he knew he was doing wrong. He just didn't have any other way to fix the problem.
Well, one way could have maybe been a blockade to prevent the Klingons from continuously supplying the other side.
Well, that's true. They probably should have done that.
Yeah, but the Klingons had the cloaking device even back then, so...
Okay. Well, what was the Next Gen episode when they were trying to catch the Romulans supplying the Klingons, or trying to create a war between the Klingons and the Federation? It was two-part.
And it took like 80 or 90 ships to catch 5 Romulans, only because they knew where they were coming from.
Right. Redemption Part 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's right.
We got a far afield. What was the question?
Yeah, we kind of got a little off track there. Sorry.
Okay, well, let's see. I was asking, why is interference a bad thing? And the answer so far has been because it leads to war. But then we say, wait a minute, it only leads to war if it results in our technology leaking, the higher technology getting into the more primitive hands. And wow, there's a whole lot of unexamined ideas in there. Primitive people, looking at them as a group, but. Then we said, okay, well, assume other ways of interference are bad, according to the argument so far, because they can lead to war within a society, not necessarily war with us, but war within the society.
Yeah, that I do. I kind of agree with that. Sorry, because I mean, you generally want the society to grow on its own, naturally, let them overcome their differences before they're armed with, the most dangerous substances and weapons in the world, or in the universe, I should say, I guess. If you don't, you're going to get situations that I mentioned before where one side will be more heavily armed than the other, and you got a war starting. And they blow themselves up, blow the entire planet up. And there was something else I was going to say. I'm trying to remember what it was, but go ahead.
Okay, so here's what I see as the problem with this idea. It seems to presume a doctrine of societal evolution in a sort of pseudo-Marxist or Hegelian way that there are these historical forces that shape societies over time, and that societies progress from a more primitive state to a more advanced state over time, and that all they need is time without interference, and they will either become better or at least not be a threat. And I think that assigning people into groups like that seems to be completely arbitrary. I mean, people are people no matter what planet they come from. And I don't necessarily buy the idea of this sort of total cultural isolation, especially within Star Trek, when you've got all these planets that have parallel evolutions to Earth that are clearly being influenced by what happened on Earth, even without any sort of conscious, the gangster planet, the Rome planet.
The gangster planet, though, is an example, for example, of intervention. In other words,
bad example.
That was
right. I forgot. Bad example. I meant the Rome planet and the different planets that come about without an actual contact, but through parallel evolution or whatever they're.
There were a lot of those in the old series. There was the world where the Yangs and the Chins were at war.
Comms.
Yangs and Comms, that's what it was. Thank you.
Oh, I remember now.
I think we have to ignore parallel development as a plot device from the old episodes that they ended up getting rid of. I mean, ultimately that's a crazy thing. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, what it shows though that okay, let's go. I normally hate doing this. I normally do not like to bring quantum physics into an argument.
Okay.
But I'm going to this time to talk about the what's that principle of if you look at something you've already changed it, the uncertainty principle, isn't that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you're going to explore space, you're already changing the dynamic. You're already interfering simply by looking.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's it seems to be where they decide to draw the line seems to me to be completely arbitrary. And I think people say, well, the exceptions prove the rule, because there are so many exceptions to the Prime Directive, and they usually turn out fine in Star Trek. It seems to me that exceptions don't prove the rule. Exceptions are what disprove rules. And there seems to be a whole lot of exceptions to the Prime Directive, even within Star Trek, without even getting into its implications as a real-world doctrine. But even within Star Trek, it just seems to me to be a plot device to create conflict for the characters when they feel like doing something, but they want to put Starfleet in a position of telling them they can't do what they want to do, and so it creates conflict. That seems to be more of a writing tool than a doctrine of foreign policy that should be taken all that seriously. Even though I'm sure the writers thought of it as a foreign policy doctrine, because it's the 60s and they're into the anti-Vietnam whole 60s thing.
Well, even today, there's a lot of people who are opposed to what they see as American imperialism. The fact that there's a McDonald's in every country in the world is part of America's insidious plot of spreading their ideals of capitalism and democracy all over the world. So, I mean, even today, there are people who think it's not right for one culture to try to force or influence another culture to be like them, that you should let a culture make choices for themselves how they're going to be.
Well, specifically, Gilly, though, that culture. In other words, because that it's efficient and because it's doing that, it tends to destroy local culture. So that's part of the thing. So to the extent that it's important to be able to preserve local culture, the not having, by not having any walls or any rules, you can immediately wipe things out and do all kinds of damage. I mean, for example, if we were to give, when we give, like incredible amounts of foreign aid to some kind of, drought-ridden country in the third world, if we were to suddenly just give all this grain that the federal government buys and doesn't even have any use for, we just give it to them. What ends up happening is that all local producers of food are instantly put out of business, and so they're not able to actually, have a sustainable, self-sustainable economy,
Right. Which is, we did good, but we ended up causing long-term harm for that short-term benefit of providing the relief supplies.
Can you say bailouts?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got a couple things to say about that. There used to be this idea. Well, let me sort of give you a sort of short history of American foreign policy with regard to the Prime Directive. Of course, in the beginning, we were British colonies, and we needed help to fight our war for independence. So we got a treaty with France. And then during Washington's presidency, a big issue was, should we be friends with the French or with the English? And a lot of people were fairly critical of some of Washington's decisions. And Washington, in his farewell address, gives a sort of foreign policy advice that he wants to guide the country, and not just in the immediate future, but sort of in a sort of semi-permanent idea. I think he's looking at the history of the Roman Empire, and he's looking at he's looking to ancient sources of wisdom to make his recommendation. And his recommendation is to have amicable relations with all nations, but no special favors and no entangling alliances. Temporary alliances only in cases of emergency, and then that is all. So this spawns a movement that I'm not sure whether they would have liked the term, but which historians remember as isolationism, American isolationism, which is the idea, basically, America, other than trade, isolationists have usually believe in tariffs of some variety, but they usually don't want to cut off trade entirely. But isolationists generally wanted America to be for Americans in the sense of minimizing interactions with the rest of the world as much as possible, economically, socially, militarily, in just about every department. And this idea recurs every so often in American history in various forms. The Ron Paul campaign had some echoes of the isolationist cause. This Washington's advice seems to me made a lot of sense for the 18th century world that he lived in, and even for most of the 19th century, pretty much all the 19th century, made a lot of sense. But Pearl Harbor really changed the world. And in the World Wars, and when we started getting the invention of the jet airplane, we started getting into a world where the whole world is intimately connected, and you can circumnavigate the whole globe in just under 2 days. I don't know what the number is now, but it's down to numbers of hours that are less than 100. It's like 48 or something like hours, or 36 hours, something like that, to circumnavigate the globe in a jet. And so the whole world is connected whether we like it or not. And staying within our own empire, which we are an empire, whether we like it or not, even without going outside of the borders of the United States, we're an empire because we span from the Atlantic to the Pacific. but going outside the border, without going outside of the borders of our empire, we are an empire. But we are no longer protected by the Atlantic Ocean like we used to be. The whole world is interconnected, and it's no longer as simple as it was in Washington's day. And so that's why I was definitely not a Ron Paul supporter, because I think Ron Paul, though his ideas are cute, going back to the 18th century Washington's farewell address, that's great and all, but there's this thing called Pearl Harbor and 9/11 that happened that they kind of changed the dynamic. We kind of need to re-examine some of that in the light of new technologies and a changing world. So anyway, that's after Pearl Harbor. Charles Lindbergh, who was the foremost advocate of the cause of isolationism, made a speech in which he basically formally ended the cause of isolationism. He said, that starting from then on, we had to have the best, military that modern science and economics and politics can put together to basically do what a political opponent of isolationism, Woodrow Wilson, said, which was to make the world safe for democracy. Now, of course, that's always meant different things to different politicians, but the basic idea, though, is that it's not, it's just not safe to leave rogue states with the power to seriously threaten our security and our interests around, like it might have, because nowadays, a threat can come from anywhere and be here in a number of hours. I mean, it's just not the same world. And so, based on this new dynamic, new in terms of we're not in the 18th or 19th century anymore. We're in the 20th and 21st century now. I am fairly hawkish sort of guy. Though on the other hand, there's limits.
I mean, I was just going to say though. So in what you're kind of this, even all the way from Washington back though, I think that part of the prime directive question that you're even examining, in terms of entangling alliances and things like that, is, let's say, the relationships between the Federation and post-warp societies. So in other words, we're he's concerned here about what the European powers, or maybe later Japan, are great powers are doing, as opposed to like contexts that we may well be having, let's say, under the Monroe Doctrine with countries that aren't great power threats, right? So isn't it like the opposite? I mean, in other words, there's still these two different questions. What are we doing with peers as opposed to what are we doing with developing societies?
Yeah, there's a Washington's idea is no favors, treat all countries the same, whether they're worse, whether they're sort of below us on the totem pole or above us, or the food chain, or whatever you want to call it. Treat them all amicably and treat them all the same is his idea.
But what was the policy for, let's say, dealings with the Cherokee Nation, the Creek Nation, the Iroquois Confederacy, that kind of thing? In other words, these are the cultures that the U.S. is not having those same kind of dealings with. We're actually declaring those to be sub-sovereign and under our in our whatever prime directive incubation zone.
Well, that's complicated, because the Native American peoples, in some context and by some statesmen, are considered nations, and by others they aren't. I think Washington tended toward regarding them as nations, at least in some ways. He has a whole history of the French and Indian Wars and trying to salvage Britain's meager Native American allies and keep them British, and not let them go over to the French. And so he has experience in dealing with that kind of thing. But there's an interesting parallel there to what happens in the Federation, because all of these star empires are quite different than local planetary governments, because all of them, the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, the Cardassians, all of them have stars within their territory that they don't control. What they control is the space in between the stars, in a way, in the sense that they keep other star empires out of their territory and gradually explore their territory. So it's not quite that our territory is everywhere where we control these planets and have people on these planets. It's our territory is everywhere outside of our center, where we have sent our ships before they bump into another power that is somewhat on the same magnitude as we are. And that's where the boundaries between the different empires end up being made, which is where the different warp-capable ships have met, on their exploratory missions. And that's where the borders first come from. But within each of these star empires, there are all these little teeny societies that don't recognize the Federation government or the whatever other star empire government there is, but are there are all these little isolationist peoples like the Tholians and the Breen, and there's all kinds of weird little planets that don't want any outside interference.
Well, I think that both the Tholians and the Breen are actually star empires, but there would be lots of little planets that don't have.
Might be thinking of the wrong guys.
Yeah, in other words, there would be little. I completely agree with you that there are a whole bunch of little planets, let's say, that are just their own planet. And I guess I wonder, we haven't actually seen in Star Trek to very much extent what anybody other than the Federation does with their little planets that are inside their space empire borders, right? So in other words, we know what the Federation's basic rule is, and we know, let's say, what the Borg's rule is within their star empire for the little planets. But what do the Klingons actually do? We haven't actually seen like a Klingon slave world, with the exception of like Organia, right?
Yeah, I think Organia, before we find out they're super beings, Organia, I think, is supposed to be showing us the model of how Klingon colonization goes. I think that any doctrine that would have us stand by and let a disease that could be cured ravage a population, or allow a population to die out from any sort of natural disaster, is obviously flawed.
But I think you've introduced a whole different topic. Are we done with we might start wars?
Oh, right. I guess I should say that. Well, my point is, though, that we might start wars argument may be valid in certain contexts to not take certain actions, but it cannot justify the Prime Directive as a whole, or the Prime Directive being prime. It might justify keeping the advanced technology out of the hands of cultures that haven't naturally developed it, and then only on a pragmatic level. It hasn't told us exactly why the more primitive cultures are not being allowed access to the shared resources of other worlds in other areas, or why no contact, not even cultural contact.
Well, I mean, if you want to look, back at U.S. history, as you were saying, some Native American nations allied with the U.S. colonists, others allied with the French, and it didn't matter whether they were U.S. allies or enemies. It seems like all of those cultures are pretty much eradicated by today. So it's not like there's a beneficial way to interact with a culture without changing that culture and harming it, because we did it nicely and we did it rudely, and it all ended badly.
I don't think I think our interactions with the Native Americans and our how they've been treated is of course a great historic wrong. I don't think that shows in general that all cultural cross exchange with cultures we arbitrarily deem primitive or third world or what have you is necessarily always a bad thing, though. Of course, when people wanted America to be a sort of beacon of freedom to the world or make the world safe for democracy or whatever else, they were kind of hoping that sort of American-style political ideas and the ideal American-style political ideals would spread, and people in foreign countries would be quoting Madison and Jefferson. Instead, they're quoting Madonna and Britney Spears and so on. So it hasn't really worked out quite the way we hoped. The Americanization of the world.
Well, I want to point out as a historical precedent, though, with the British colonial contact with Native American peoples did exactly what we're talking about in terms of this war starting thing. So what the tribes that are or nations that are in immediate contact with Europeans, they trade, they get European technology, or just as a result of that, they have better weapons, they have better capacity to farm or any other thing, and they immediately move west, and they have what might be therefore thought. Obviously, the other American Indians are not all one people, but they dominate, they attack the other tribes. I mean, American Indian history is a little muddy, but a prime example of this would be Native Hawaiian history. And so when Europeans encountered Hawaii, what immediately happens is the king of the main island of Hawaii gets a hold of European weapons and ships and every other thing, and immediately conquers all the other islands, which had independent kingdoms, and suddenly creates the kingdom of Hawaii as a unified monarchy or a unified state. And within something like 20 years, the influence is such that it becomes a constitutional monarchy. Within 80 years, something like whatever it is, 70% of the Hawaiians are dead, and there's a revolution where American settlers seize control of the whole thing and disenfranchise the Hawaiians.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Hawaiian history.
My main point is simply that when we do get the technology, if this is an analogy to our history, when we encounter people and who haven't previously encountered, let's say, European technology, what ended up happening was they got a hold of it, and then they fought their neighbors, and they usually dominated their neighbors. So when we think of American Indians, let's say on the plains, our idea, these guys riding around on horses, attacking the buffaloes with rifles and stuff like that. Obviously, horses, they didn't even have horses. Before, that's European technology that gets put in there.
Sure. I'm not sure where you're going with that, though. I mean, can you spell out what is your conclusion from this history?
Well, that it is possible that contact will lead to wars within the society that's being contacted.
Oh, sure, it is possible.
I'd even go so far as to say it's a likely outcome and not just a possibility. It's more than likely what's going to happen.
If you bring superior technology from outside into a society.
Yes, because if they're already if they're already, let's say, having as a normal procedure, war, like for example, that's definitely true, in the pre-World War II era for the entire, Earth. If any one of the nation states, if given, an advanced technology, would have used that technology.
Well, hold on though. Your point seems to be so far that technology is bad because technologies that are developed internally to societies are just as much turned to war as, in real world history at least, just as much turned to war as ones from outside. And so I'm not sure the responsibility that is being suggested here is all that realistic or accounts for just how technology actually spreads. Of course, as somewhat of a technologist, and being in computer science, I guess I do tend to like to stand up for technology as being a good thing.
Oh,
Well,
technology is a good thing, but I mean, we're talking about, like you were saying, it's a question of responsibility.
yes.
I mean,
with greater power comes greater responsibility.
yeah, and if Planet X and Planet Y want to kill each other with whatever they've got, it's bad, it's tragic, it's horrible, but hopefully if they kill each other a little bit with lesser weapons by the time they meet the Federation or any more advanced civilization, you get a wholesale slaughter when the more advanced weapons come in because they haven't had enough experience of the horrors of war to kind of take that step back.
See, when you're a primitive race, I mean, you're killing each other. If you're at war with another faction or whatever, you're going to kill each other with a stone knife. You're going face to face. You're seeing the person you're killing. You're not using a gun, which is shot at a range, which still is it will affect you if you're killing someone with that, but not as much as getting up close and personal with a hand weapon. And then bring more and more technology into the picture. You drop a bomb on someone, you don't even see the person you're killing, and you're killing millions at a time. So you become more and more detached from the killing, and it doesn't affect you as much. And you can easily just press a button and take care of a problem, take care of that faction. They're gone, And Earth in the Star Trek mythos had to go through World War III before it became mature enough to be able to handle the technology responsibly and use it for greater good.
Okay, first of all, I think I said in our discussion about, on the first episode, in our discussion about Next Generation versus DS9, that I think Roddenberry's concept of cultural maturity is pretty nonsensical. The Federation isn't mature. I'm with Q. They're not mature. There's no cultural maturity here.
Well, I'd say we were more mature than we were 100 years ago. World War I introduced us to nerve gas, mustard gas, all sorts of nasty little chemical warfare, and the automatic weapon. And we've come up with nastier, deadlier, and more vicious chemical and biological weapons since then. But we've also realized how terrible these things are, and many places have treaties or policies in effect that limit the use of such weapons. Had we developed something nasty like Ebola as one of our first germ warfare experiments, there wouldn't have been enough survivors of civilization to learn not to use such horrible weapons.
I think that there are groups out there that if they could get their hands on Ebola or whatever else, they would use it in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
And
well, I'm not saying we're perfect, but
they're not separated from that by any lack of intelligence in technical skill. They're separated purely by economics, and I'm not saying I'm I'm really thinking we really need to be treating people as individuals rather than as groups and cultures. Primarily, people are individual, and families, and I don't really. Cultural identities are, I think, secondary, and I'm not buying the whole idea that we get to decide based on the completely arbitrary standard of having come up with warp drive. That's just too neat and convenient.
Okay, so
I do kind of agree with that, but go ahead.
I think we got to the point, though. Maybe okay. I'm also not going to say that I'm not coming down here saying I totally support the Prime Directive, but rather maybe we can just say for this first criteria, this that we've come up with this complaint of why you have a Prime Directive, that you might start wars within the planet that you're this is a pre-warp society. That's one of the justifications for it.
It seems to me
that we agree that may happen, but that may not justify the rest of it. So maybe we should go on to another justification or another, in other words, another quality, so that we can weigh in the end whether or not it's justified as a whole.
Also, I'm not sure that it's our responsibility it's our responsibility on a pragmatic level. Well, it's our responsibility on an ethical level to keep things like the atomic bomb out of the hands of people who would use it and or who don't understand it. But I don't see as how it's our responsibility that say people discover that there is this wider that there are other worlds, and whatever societal effects the discovery of there being other worlds has, I don't see are our responsibility. And even sharing our general scientific discoveries, not just selling them weapons, but I mean sharing our scientific discoveries. What they decide to do with those, I think, is also not really our responsibility. I mean,
I don't know.
That's why I'm saying. So my question: why is interference a bad thing? Well, I think the burden of proof is on the Prime Directive to show that it is actually the responsibility of the people sharing the technology what the receivers do with it.
Yeah, see, that's the part that kind of gets me. I mean, if they wouldn't, I mean, just about anything can be weaponized and has been weaponized from a technological standpoint. This doesn't mean technology is bad, because weapons get converted to peaceful civilian uses. We have the internet, we have cell phones, we have a lot of wonderful new medical treatments developed from military applications, and the fact that we find so many efficient ways of killing ourselves, we need to find good ways to patch ourselves up. So I'm not saying technology is inherently bad, but any bit of technology can be weaponized. And to say, hey, I sold them something that was completely harmless, it's not my fault they decided to use it as a weapon. It's not my fault if I sell somebody cocaine and they die of a drug overdose. I was just giving them cocaine, which has legitimate medicinal uses. Or it's not my fault the drunk driver wrapped his car around a tree. Alcohol in moderation is beneficial for health. In excess, it causes problems. And
well, let's not go there.
Well, I mean, I used to be a bartender, and actually in most places there are laws on the books that we can be held liable for someone. If we keep giving a drunk guy alcohol and they get in an accident, we can be held responsible for what they did. Partial liability. I don't know what the exact legal term is, but basically we saw they were impaired, which means they're not going to be making good judgment. And yet we allowed them to take even more alcohol, which is compounding a mistake they made. You can get in a lot of trouble. You can lose your license if you give a drunk guy more booze.
Wow. I'm not sure that makes much sense to hold bartenders liable. I mean, if a guy's drunk and he's saying he's going to drive, and you give him more booze, yeah, sure, that might make you liable. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that always makes sense, though. Here's the thing: if you were going to have a prime directive, then you would make it the number one consideration as a bartender to prevent that from happening. And you couldn't operate a bar,
No.
Actually, you can, and
I don't
they
agree
do
with that,
because the prime directive for bars is don't serve anyone under 21. So there is an age limit. There is a developmental limit. It might be arbitrary at 21. I believe the UK has it at 18, but there is still this arbitrary developmental mark that is put in place saying, in general, this is...
That's an individual, and that's an age, and it may be arbitrary, but it is objective in the sense that it can be objectively applied. But
well,
in the same way that development of warp drive is an...
No, I don't think
seems a little bit objective. I mean, not objective. It seems a little bit arbitrary. Suddenly they developed warp capabilities. Oh, they must be mature and ready to enter the universe.
Well, even if it's not a question of them being mature and ready to enter the universe, once you get the warp drive, you're able to blow up the universe. So
exactly.
Once you're warp capable, contact needs to be made either to encourage you to be peaceful or to force you to be peaceful if you're going to go out on a quest for galactic domination. I mean,
there's some major problems here. First of all, like I said, people aren't these anonymous groups. People are individuals. Second of all, developed warp drive, the key word being developed, is ambiguous. Did the Klingons develop warp drive? No. They've never developed warp drive. They stole it from somebody else. And so what it is it's have warp drive, and that's an economic, not a developmental standard, and it's an arbitrary economic standard, and that just doesn't make sense.
Well, the fact of have warp drive, that's a realpolitik standard. In other words, the Federation may well want to apply, way back when, prime directive to Klingons because they weren't developed enough, but it simply they weren't able to because the Klingons have too much military capacity. That's simply like where ideals intersect with reality.
Well, if your ideals can't deal with reality, you've got some problems in your ideals. I can see some kind of general rule against some forms of interference with other cultures. Okay? Some kind of general rule against some forms of interference against other cultures. But the prime directive masquerades as an absolute. And I believe in absolutes. I just think this particular one is a bogus absolute.
So
I'm not a big fan of absolutes, but we've seen plenty of examples of captains violating the prime directive.
And that usually turns out great, doesn't it?
Well, a lot of times we leave before we see how it turns out, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Captain Kirk drops off the flintlocks and then flies away. We don't get to see what the final death toll was for the inevitable clash.
He destroys their world computer, and come on, those guys they're about to face starvation and every other horrific thing just because he thought their planet was stagnant.
Yeah. So it's not always generally a good thing when they break the rules. Sometimes they break the rules because they're backed into a corner and it's horrible. Other times they have to end up going back in time to fix the rules they broke, and everything just gets messy. But I'm not a big fan of absolutes. But at the same time, if you're going to have some kind of general non-interference clause, because there are so many ways it can go wrong, it's better to err on the side of caution instead of being conquistadors. Hello, we come from the stars. We're here to give you unlimited energy, all the food you can handle, take care of all of your material needs, give you all the medicine cures for all your diseases. Maybe it's just because of my upbringing, but I remember that To Serve Man is a cookbook.
Yeah, that's in The Silver Chair. That's a Lewisian reference there. Guys, okay, I've completely lost my where we are.
Well, we're coming up on an hour here. Do we have any more aspects to this topic we want to bring up?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I had the other two questions. What were they? Why is interference a bad thing?
I have maybe a counter. I mean, we may want to have to do Prime Directive. I mean, this is a huge issue, right? So it may well have to be more than one episode. But I have considering that Ben is. I mean, I actually think that the Prime Directive isn't justifiable, but Ben has kind of taken out a pretty, let's say, radical anti-Prime Directive position, I think. And so I have a counter, maybe two counter examples that I like to ask.
Okay.
Okay. So, for example, so we've really kind of talked about, you've been talking about like individuals and how we, how like individual as opposed to how states are interacting with each other. And there's a couple.
Yeah, societies, because the Prime Directive doesn't address states; it addresses cultures or societies, or it doesn't address states. You only start addressing states once they're warp capable, as far as Starfleet's concerned.
Well, the one state that's addressed is the Federation. So, in other words, the Federation is a state that is how it's dealing with, let's say, planet-based cultures that, like you say, haven't perhaps developed states, or maybe they don't have at least a unified state.
Or they don't have warp capable culture, and therefore their government isn't recognized by the Federation.
Right. So, we have like the example of a couple examples where societies like that then do have intervention happen, where, let's say, warp capable or individuals possessed of a lot of technology go in and intervene and try to take control of those planets. So, for example, in Deep Space Nine, we have false prophets where the two Ferengis land on one of the planets and take control of it. And then we have in the Next Generation, we have Devil's Due, where a kind of the flim-flam artist masquerading as Ardra tries to take control, of a planet that by pretending to be the god of that planet or the devil of that planet. And so these are like, kind of the extreme other examples of when people with the technology do intervene and, like, for their own, let's say, selfish ends of, like creating a slave society for themselves.
Sure, and I said rules against some kinds of interference in some contexts need to be made.
There was an old episode of the original series where they visited the Nazi planet, and it was actually an example of interference. A Starfleet captain visited this culture that was on the brink of war, and he had this plan to reorganize the state to avoid the war, and he modeled it after the good parts of what Germany did before World War II. Only things went horribly, horribly wrong, and he got the bad parts as well, which is why you had the planet of evil space Nazis.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it's terrible. Patterns of Force.
Yes, thank you.
It was actually a Starfleet historian, not a captain. It was John Gill. Anyway.
But he wanted to. He was there for beneficial purposes. He wanted to interfere to prevent war, to prevent suffering, to prevent genocide. Yeah. And he had the best of intentions, and he was trying to do good, and it just didn't work right.
Because he was a terrible historian.
Yeah,
Well, isn't
Yeah.
everybody who comes onto the Enterprise from the wider Federation terrible?
Yes.
I mean, they never have anybody who's competent and helpful and polite.
yeah, there are 7 people on the crew who are competent, and everyone else is either a goober that's going to die, or once they get the superpowers, they turn all evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
that's
just
the
about
thing.
every ambassador who steps foot on the Enterprise throws his weight around.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that maybe good intentions, bad intentions, maybe it's a good idea the Federation has a law against interfering, given the quality of people in the Federation.
The quality of most of the people in the Federation. Yeah, but the thing is, so many people say they want to apply the philosophy of Star Trek to real life, and I'm like, whose philosophy in Star Trek? And they'll usually say the Federation's philosophy, and I'll say, what Federation's philosophy? This is the philosophy of 7 people who are on the show, and that's all. Period.
Yeah.
Well, and even they'll break the rules, like you point out, like when like one of the best episodes there is when Cisco tries to, he breaks all the rules in order to try to bring the Romulans into the war against the Dominion, right? I mean, that's just probably among my favorite episodes, but he obviously has a pretty serious sacrifice ethically to do it.
You know what? I've been thinking about this, and I think it really would have been a lot better if we had done the Federation or the Prime Directive episode after we'd done the race episodes for each individual race. Because, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happened with the Klingons and with the Romulans that I would want to sort of refer back to, but that would be opening up a whole different thing. This is really
We
too
can come
big.
back to this topic. We don't have to cover it all in one episode.
Maybe what we should do is, as we further pursue talking about the Prime Directive, we'll have to go episodically, I think, to cover this. We'd have to talk about those episodes in which the Prime Directive was important and major decisions made by particular captains, and try and go on a case-by-case basis and see whether the Prime Directive sticks. I guess I might give you one of the reasons why I'm kind of very biased against the whole idea of the Prime Directive, and one of the reasons is that I really hate Enterprise, the show, and one of the things I most hate about Enterprise is Dr. Phlox, the Kevorkian monster with no medical ethics. You may remember him, and his episode "Dear Doctor," which is probably the worst episode of Star Trek ever, is the one that the Prime Directive is supposedly based on, and in it he makes a purely political, racist, genocidal decision that is completely arbitrary to to refuse to provide a life-saving cure to one group of people on a planet because he perceives them as not allowing another group of people on the planet to reach their full potential. Not that they're doing anything actually directly oppressive to these other folks. They're just not allowing them to reach their full potential because they're kind of helping them too much. And so in order to stop people A from helping people B, he refuses to help people A.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just that's just wrong on so many levels. The most important being that he is supposed to be a doctor, and a doctor's duty is to do no harm and to help cure diseases wherever he finds them, even if it's in an enemy soldier or a politician he disagrees with or whatever. It doesn't matter because he's a doctor. And his justification, of course, is that it's a genetic disorder, and he arbitrarily decides that genetic disorders are, in some sense, natural, and that a doctor shouldn't interfere with, quote, nature, unquote. And I'm of course, that's completely bogus, because that's what a doctor is for, interfering with nature. That's why we have them. And don't give me the Hippocrates wasn't Tenobulan line. Mr. Spock says in Star Trek: The Animated Series that Hippocrates would not have approved of lame excuses, Doctor. Yeah, Hippocrates.
Well, I'll give the excuse that I don't consider Enterprise to be canonical. I can't even.
Thank you. Yes. What did we call it a few weeks back? Enterprise is the bungled fan fiction.
Yeah, and I haven't even. I have to tell you, I've never seen it, and I'm not. I mean, I saw the first season, and I'm just not. I can't watch it.
I like Scott Bakula. I grew up watching Quantum Leap, but yeah, Enterprise it's fanfic, and it's not even good fanfic.
Bad, terrible history. It's just bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I guess my you have to be careful of me and my anti-Dr. Phlox rants, because the actor is good. I would hire him to play a villain on any show that I'm making, but I don't think his character is a good guy. So yeah.
Well, I think your plan to, like, in other words, let's go ahead and maybe do some of the other topics in the meantime, but then come back and do Prime Directive on maybe even a couple episode by couple episode basis, where we're like just use precedents from maybe a couple episodes and then discuss it. That's probably because this is so wide ranging.
Yeah, we've drawn our net too wide today, guys. All right, thanks very much, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you. Nice meeting you, John.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Absolutely. See you next time.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Later.
Okay.
Marauder Mode, the animated series.
There you go.
I don't know if that's on the bad list. I think that's on the bad list, but it might also end up being so bad it's good. But Saturday morning cartoons, the Marauder Mode.
I got an old joke I gotta tell about that. You know that picture of the empty field, Back to the Future 3? I took that picture. Just saying. People were like, who would take that? Oh, I did. The Marquis, they're interesting. Why isn't the Borg on here? The Borg episode. Duh.